go into another. Lastly, the hotline should have been used to warn that this was not intentional. The second aspect is the operational aspect. And when I talk about operational aspect, I mean that what are the launch protocols and mechanisms that the Indian strategic forces follow? Do they have a two-man rule? Do they have permissive action links? And whether this was an exercise aimed at testing the readiness or the safety and security of their strategic delivery system. According to some reports, this was an inspection exercise, but did the inspection exercise allow the missiles to be kept on a high readiness levels? And also now moving to the security aspect, was it intentional? Is it possible for an Indian missile regiment commander to launch it and override some procedures and technical requirements in a classical manifestation of the mad colonel dilemma, which reflects a very grave situation and highlights the risk of insider threat? It could have three aspects. It could be ideologically motivated, it could be psychologically inspired, or it could also have a possibility that there is not a complete trust between the political and military leadership. Now, coming to the third aspect of my analysis, which is the nuclear command and control. So, what is very important to understand is what is the authorization protocol and procedure required for launching a missile of strategic nature. Does it require a top level authorization, or can a missile commander launch it on his own? Then that means it is in contradiction to the doctrinal commitments that India has made as part of its centralized assertive nuclear command control. And also, does Indian missile systems have a fail-safe, fail-deadly, positive and negative controls built into their forces or not? These are the nuclear command control related questions that deserve deeper reflection. Now, coming to the doctrinal part, very briefly, I think this incident clearly reflects there is a clear dichotomy between the political commitments made by India as part of its declaratory doctrine and what is actually happening on the ground in terms of the readiness level, in terms of the operational procedures that their forces maintain. Coming to the safety and security aspect, I think both human and technical aspect deserve careful reflection, because either of them could have caused this problem, which raises serious questions about the safety, security, and reliability of the Indian strategic forces. And it also indicates that the debate which has happened in the last few years regarding a counter force posture that India is tempted towards is perhaps being operationalized. Why I am saying that? There are 9 reasons. 1, readiness level is high. Number 2, the missile forces are canisterized. Number 3, they are kept in a ready to fire state. Number 4, there is greater development and advancement in cruise missiles than ballistic missiles. Number 4, there is a greater emphasis on accuracy and rather than the scale of destruction. Number 5, the launchers are also not fixed, not in silos, but mobile. Number 6, the warheads are also there. So perhaps they are no longer keeping the warhead separate from the delivery systems. Number 7, the high investment of I2SR capabilities, which is inconsistent with a no first use doctrine. Number 8 is the arsenal size, and the number 9 is the development and acquisition of the BMD capabilities. All these developments indicate that the Indian doctrine is actually outlived its original political commitment that it earlier made. Coming to the last part of my presentation, the diplomatic and strategic dimension of this issue. What I have come to the conclusion is that in reality, notwithstanding the political commitments and the diplomatic statements they have been making at different fora, it is clear that the Indian nuclear strategy is divorced from its declaratory doctrine. And the evidence of that is the actual post posture, which is divorced from the commitments. It is indicative that there is a development towards flexible response rather than massive retaliation. And it is very important for the international community to pay due attention and consideration to these very serious developments in terms of reviewing the cooperation in strategic domain with India regarding the sharing of missile technology, despite Indian membership of NSG, and also review the cooperation that they have in terms of the nuclear deals that they have signed with so many countries. Lastly, I would say that the third scenario, that could it be intentional use, also deserves due reflection, because it is a possibility that it was launched, but the statements that came later on were aimed at dissuading Pakistan from escalating and responding in kind. And let me suffice it to say that had this missile not landed in a relatively less populated area, and had there been some casualties, Pakistani response would also have been different, notwithstanding whatever diplomatic commitments or statements and explanations that India has made. And for 80 hours, no communication took place from the Indian side regarding the nature, the cause, and the motivation of this incident. So my last word is that in my assessment, based on these three scenarios, safety issue, security issue, or intentional launch, Pakistan's policy of quid pro quo plus would be in place, but it would distinguish and discriminate in the context of the motive and nature of this incident. It would be proportionate, and it would distinguish between an unintentional accident or an intentional event. And that is why I think it is a very grave situation, an unprecedented one between two neighboring nuclear armed countries, and the international community deserve to look at it and look at Indian behavior, which is very irresponsible in terms of maintaining safely and securely its nuclear and strategic weapon system. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Ali, for your Thank you, Mr. Muhammad Ali, for your very lucid and very clear analysis of the very strange incident which took place in this launch of an Indian missile into Pakistani territory. I will, of course, call upon the other two worthy speakers, but I'll just make a couple of observations before we go forward. And that is that we'll take all the three speakers consecutively, one after the other. And then we will open up for a question answer session so that we economize on the time. This is Ramzan, and we have to be mindful of the strain that this is going to cause upon the speakers as well as the participants. So in the light of that particular situation, it would be better if we economize on the time. So you are most welcome to ask questions, and also questions from uh, those who are listening on Zoom and participating online. So I now give the floor to Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal, professor at the Quaid-e-Azam University, and a introduction was read out by my colleague when we began the proceedings. Dr. Jaspal.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and very good morning. Let me start by thanking the Professor Ambassador Sarwar Naqvi Saab for providing me this opportunity to share my views on a very important topic. We have already seen or heard that Mr. Muhammad Ali has given us a good picture of various scenarios, safety, security, and intentional use. I'm not looking this thing with that perspective, and as it was asked by the organizers about a 3-question, and I try to limit myself within those 3 questions. Let me make it one thing clear that India has been working on both hypersonic and supersonic missiles. And in this India's program, it has been, you can say, receiving a technological assistance directly or indirectly from the external sources. If I can, in the beginning, make this as a condition, as Muhammad Ali pointed out, that safety and security, the nations or the individuals who are supporting the India's this technologically advanced missiles program, are they taking into account these kind of the concerns? So these are the issues which I am looking. It's an open secret that since 2019, India has carried out a few scramjet technological, you can say, using tests of the super hypersonic missiles. But let me come back on this incident, which we say on March 19, 2022. The Indian supersonic missile, which is referred as a BrahMos, a second version of the BrahMos, missile misfired and crashed in Pakistan territory. It traveled 124 kilometers inside and Pakistani territory and 3 minutes and 44 seconds. Now here is a not debate or question. We have 3 scenarios: accidental, authorized, or inadvertent. Now, according to the international observers, though Indian officials claim it accidental, and we do, for the time being, I also accept it as an accidental. If it was not an accidental, then why Pakistan did not respond? So it is very clear it was an accidental. From the very beginning, we assumed that maybe they were involved in the missile testing exercise or routine training exercise, and something went technological fault, and that was the first thing. Now, even if it was an accident, according to the international observers, even this prior permission for this exercise was there. For instance, from the Prime Minister's office or the Ministry of Defense, I mean India, had given the prior approval for the test launch, and the Indian Air Force had scheduled the test for that day. The nature of this malfunction still qualifies as an unauthorized missile launch. So this is an observation. And of course, I have a difference. I think that if they had a permission secured, it does not qualify as an unauthorized, it's a malfunction. But now here is a problem is that whatever the situation, but we have to admit that presently Indian military is equipped with the BrahMos, a medium-range 400-kilometer strength ramjet supersonic cruise missiles that can be launched from submarine, ships, aircraft, or land. So far, they said that the they have tested or used these exercises from land or aircraft. It's a reality that the BrahMos is one of the fastest supersonic cruise missiles in the world. Both Indian Army and Air Force have been using, as I pointed out earlier. The Air Force has, you can say, did the air launch from Su-30 Mk1 aircraft, this missile. So there have been debated an outcome of three scenarios. First, I mean that after its misfire, the missile could have hit a commercial aircraft, leading to unimaginable consequences. Now, this is a point which one cannot take lightly. If it had hit our space, domestic or international, how we will be assumed, or if we fail to detect it. Certainly, this international community, which is very much poised, or Western international observers, they immediately conclude that the missile was fired by a non-state actor in Pakistan. And it was not an Indian missile, but it was a Pakistani some rocket. That is a hypothetical. This is a reality we didn't detect. We cannot take it lightly. This is the first point. So I'm just giving you a hypothetical scenario, and literature is full of these kind of you can say, hypothetical scenarios since 2001, in which they coined Pakistani, you can say, including the scientific community, linkages with the non-state actors. Correct or incorrect is a different debate, but this normally we heard it. Second, it could have crashed into the populated area and caused damage to life and property. If that happened, definitely Pakistan was forced to respond, because no one in the public was going to accept this, that it was just an accident, because casualties always lead to some different thinking. And thirdly, could have triggered a military response, resulting in a conflagration through misunderstanding and miscommunication. This is always a possibility. And this becomes a more possibility if you see that Pakistan had a very clear stance. As Mahmoud Ali pointed out, that Pakistan has a quid pro quo plus strategy that demands this retaliation. And if we can start from 14th February 2019, Pakistan's official stance is, which was articulated from the Prime Minister office, who is also National Command Authority, it was very clearly articulated, we will not think but retaliate. So the time space is very limited. So if we are not thinking, it means that if we are living with this quid pro quo plus strategy, definitely we were prepared, or we are in a position to retaliate. And that is the only dilemma when we try to analyze this deterrence stability within the South Asian context. We always consciously say that this deterrence theory has been theorized and practiced in the East-West scenario, I mean Russians and the Americans. We have to take into account South Asia is entirely different from that experiences. We have a geographical contiguity, response time is not more than 1 to 2, 3 minutes. And secondly, we have a history of the wars. Unlike Russians and the Americans, they had their own. Because they were allies during the First and Second World War. So these are things. So let me go further. The technological error in the dual-use supersonic missiles navigation has alarmed the inadvertent or accidental use of Indian nuclear weapons, because this missile is a dual use. Realistically, the missile misfire has sent shock waves through South Asia. However, the incident was too weak to cajole Western and American security observers. Maybe they are too busy in Russian-Ukrainian war, having ingredients of nuclear exchanges or South Asia exchanges, or South Asia famously referred to as a nuclear flashpoint has been replaced by the European flashpoint, nuclear flashpoint, or maybe it lost significance in their strategic analysis, or they lacked the courage to question the safety and security mechanism of India's nuclear arsenal because they already designated it an ally to check the rise of China. This is very important, that whatever the reason could be, this irresponsible response by the international community on this accident, let's say put an accident, is not, you can say, encouraging for strategic stability in the region. The response of the Indians can be summed up in one sentence, because 2 days later, when we did a press conference, they informed, and then certain, if you see the statements coming from Indian Defense Ministry or other, so the response can be summed up in one sentence, and that is, nervousness is the key to understand what is going on in India. This nervousness is dangerous. It's dangerous even in a conventional military environment, but now we are living in a nuclearized environment. This nervousness could be at the DRDO level, or at the command level, or at this push and pull within the Indian Armed Forces, from which one school of thought is working for integrated, you can say, theatrical command system, and the other is still desiring to live with this, what we call it, core system, or it is a still nervousness due to not clarity who is the commander of the strategic forces. So these are the things which we have to take into account. So we say Indian authorities failed to track the supersonic BrahMos missile after takeoff. Everyone is fixed in India or even here on Hindutva, illegally Indian occupied Kashmir, billion worth of military hardware purchases. These are common for us, but we fail to take into account the Indian Defense Research and Development Organization is making little to no progress in inventing technologically secure military equipment. More, India lacks effective security protocols or technical safeguards, potentially leading to unexpected consequences under the complex situation. These things are very important because BrahMos is a joint venture of the DRDO and the Russians. So this is the thing, that whether DRDO is qualified or skilled enough in the last 50, 60 decades to deal with these kind of a sophisticated reverse engineering technologies. So if you can just see, before going further, Pakistan's response manifests that its intelligence is watching closely for signs that the Indian Armed Forces are preparing for any conventional and nuclear strike. Pakistan's response qualified to be summed as confident, calm, responsible. But this response has a certain caveat, or at least a caveat, that the supersonic missile fire was a deliberate attempt to measure Pakistan's responsiveness and air defenses. Journalists say it is said that no, it's an accident, not a measure. But there are other sporting variables. The sporting variable here is that India attempted to measure Pakistan's Navy preparedness by sending its submarines in the Pakistani waters. Recently, we have identified one of that. So if they can do this at the naval side, why one can underestimate their Air Force response, and especially an Indian Air Force, which is since 2 years or 2.5 years, 2 years almost, I think, it is very much injured, with an injured or fractured ego after losing the aircraft, and that what happened on the 27th February. So you can expect from that within the organizational, if you apply this kind of some kind of. So what are the outcomes? In this, the accidental launch has exposed the grave weaknesses in the Indian technology and safety system. It reveals two things. First, the BrahMos missile is not technically advanced enough to be effectively deployed, or the Indian military is incapable of operating this missile system. This incapability of India or my adversaries threaten me more. It's better India has a capability to manage it, to secure it, and even if they deploy on a hair trigger alert, that is a lesser threatening than this, because I don't know when it will be fired. And it's a dual. And if they are on the hair trigger, definitely it will be matted with the warhead. But in this situation, it is more dangerous. Because if you are dealing with an advanced technology, with a perception, it is a fully mature technology in your hand, and at the same time it is malfunctioning, it may kill the Indians themselves, and then they say, oh, Pakistan did something. We are living in a cyber warfare. So we have to not forget these kind of the challenges when we are looking about these sort of things. Admittedly, the technological error in the nuclear-capable missiles navigation frightened the inadvertent or accidental use of Indian nuclear weapons. However, such a threat becomes more natural in the current situation, because the Indian strategic pundits have been engaged in revamping the country's nuclear doctrine, that is swapping no first use with the first use nuclear weapons option, and transiting from non-deployment of nuclear assets to deployment of nuclear assets at sea. It was very clearly announced in 2019 by the defense minister about the, you can say, quashing of the no first use concept in their military doctrine. Though the situation, things have been, or the Indian strategic community have been, you can say, contemplating how to get rid of the no first use since 2011. If you see the literature, you would find there were three schools of thoughts. One was saying, keep it. Someone was saying, completely finish it. And a third was saying, in a dual, operationally first use, diplomatically, theoretically, or you can say, rhetorically, no first use. So this is the point, and this deployment, recall Captain Sharma's statement during the post-Pulwama that we went for the deployment of nuclear assets that we see. So this is a situation very disturbing. So the nuclear doctrine or Indian nuclear doctrine transformation aims to strengthen the India's surgical strike punch, which is a part of their vocabulary since 2016 and 2017 in their official military doctrines like Joint Forces Services Doctrine or these kind of things. India's surgical strike strategy is a product of India's strategic narrative, nurtured in the Indian strategic enclave due to superiority phobia of military advantage vis-a-vis Pakistan. Earlier Indian strategic pundits echoed punitive action and hard pursuits. Certainly, since 2.5 decades, we are hearing these kind of things. So what is the Pakistan? To prevent Pakistan response, the India has been employing this nuclear blackmail tactics. The threat of nuclear weapons in such a situation as states India to swap its no first use declaratory posture with the first use. Notably, India has been contemplating altering NFU theoretically since 2011. The compelling strategy of India is an utter denial of the balance of terror existing between India and Pakistan since the nuclear tests in May 1998. As we all know, balance of terror, the product of strategic equilibrium due to nuclear arsenal of India and Pakistan, is the foundation of strategic stability in South Asia. So if you deny it, then it means that strategic stability is in a crisis. We have to not here forget, this is a reality. The nuclear first use is a luxury of the nuclear weapon state, which is confident about the superiority of its conventional forces vis-a-vis the adversary. The nuclear weapon state, which realizes that it is conventionally weak or incapable of defending itself in the conventional war, always synergizes nuclear and conventional weapons in its defensive arrangements. Therefore, a conventionally weak state cannot opt for NFU option. During the post-Pulwama military standoff, Prime Minister Modi signaled the use of weapons. He stated nuclear weapons are not kept for Diwali or night of massacre. This authenticates that his nuclear threat or the Indian Navy announcement deployment, that Indians lost this superiority complex or superiority over the Pakistan, which they were enjoying from 1971 to 1999. This shift at the conceptual level is very alarming. So we have been seeing this kind of the doctrine like Cold Star doctrine, proactive military operation. India has been grounding its military doctrine on offensive defense. And since 2016, as I said, the surgical strike strategy has gelled in India's modern making of strategy. Any military accident can escalate a conflict entailing deterrence failure, leading to war in such a situation. More explicitly, India and Pakistan command and control systems serve conventional military and nuclear functions. Real or perceived attacks to disable command and control system in a skirmish could be easily misinterpreted as a start or a prelude to a nuclear strike. So in conclusion, I submit Prime Minister Modi's irresponsible nuclear rhetoric during the post-Pulwama military standoff, India's nuclear asset deployment, and the Indian Defense Minister's revelation about the shunning of no-fuss use, and the recent Indian Armed Forces misfired supersonic missile alarm about the probability of India-Pakistan deadlock could become a nuclear crisis. Second, the international community needs to realize the irresponsible Indian behavior would adversely affect the regional strategic stability, reverting far beyond South Asia. Third, the sane Indians and the international community need to remind Indian ruling elite and by extension the Indian armed forces that Pakistan is one of the nuclear powers. Therefore, it is best not to mess with it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It is best not to mess with us. That's well said. Now, yes, as I said, I was on mute, I think. Dr. Jaspal's last sentence, that it is best not to mess with us, is a good message. I now call upon Dr. Rizwana Abbasi, who has been introduced already, an extremely competent and well versed scholar in this field, and is now currently teaching at Namal University. Dr. Rizwana, you have the floor.
Thank you, sir. First of all, I'm grateful to CISS and Ambassador Naqvi for inviting me to share my views with you all on the subject. Of course, I've been asked to cover ground on failure of diplomacy during this particular event. So as we all know that the main function of diplomacy is to ensure peaceful relations between countries and deal with difficult situations with skill in a way that create a peaceful solution without offending or upsetting others. So in the present context, we deal with nuclear diplomacy and nuclear CBMs, nuclear confidence building areas, between two nuclear weapon states. Nuclear CBMs mainly focus on preventing or resolving uncertainties, unwanted escalation of hostilities, and build mutual trust. So the nuclear CBMs are diverse arrangements grounded in certain tools such as communication channels, constraints, transparency, and verification measures. So I have tried underlining some of the subsets of procedures that foster some patterns of behavior and predictable patterns of behavior for states' military forces. So when we talk about communication channels, we all know that such channels are used by the states for the exchange of reliable, direct information at the time of crisis to diffuse tension. So communication channels are usually promoted through hotlines, which states establish at the political to political, military to military, or at the foreign secretary level, as reliable channels. So these are also promoted through regional communication centers, regional emergency management centers, or risk reduction centers that are considered effective channels of communication that help states to manage crises or conflicts. And under communication channels, states also use regular consultations and meetings that are substantial between particularly two nuclear weapon states, where states usually regularly on the routine basis share their concerns and grievances. At the second level, under constraints measures, states help to map out limited force deployment zones, thereby imposing restrictions on type and number of military equipment or troops permitted in or near a certain zone, territory, or boundary. So under transparency measures, states use to foster more openness with each other, particularly nuclear weapon states, on their military capabilities and activities. So under this arrangement, they adopt pre-notification arrangements that are given for planned military exercises or troops movements and missile tests. They also exchange data that take place detailing existing military holdings, planned purchases, military personnel and budgets, so on and so forth, particularly scenarios that are projected to build their military capabilities, and they try providing each other with advance notices of such destabilizing weapon system that they induct. So under verification measures, states promote aerial inspection that usually helps states enable to monitor compliance with force deployment in limitations in restricted zones, to confirm data exchange on disposition of military forces, and provide early warning of potentially destabilizing activities. So such kind of aerial inspections can be, of course, promoted to ground-based electronic sensor systems, and are unmanned, manned or unmanned, can also verify, states' compliance to agreed restrictions. So the other part of this verification is on-site inspection that can help states to build trust and verify that states are complying with the agreements. So when I drawing lessons from this broader framework, it is evaluated that India and Pakistan have negotiated set of not all the above that I listed, the confidence building and nuclear risk reduction measures, but some of it they have considered in the past. So the most relevant of these initiatives included a 1998 agreement to refrain from attacking nuclear installations, involving also an annual exchange of details of designated facilities, a 1991 accord to notify each other and limit the geographical space of major military exercises, a 2005 agreement on pre-notification of ballistic missiles flight test, a 2007 agreement on immediate notification of nuclear accidents. So we all should understand that the cruise missiles, although are not covered under this particular nuclear civilians regime that I have just listed. So even then, India has had some certain obligations to follow. And in my view, India has violated the 1991, 2005, and 2007 accord. In 1991 notification, it is clearly listed. It requires for that for exercises comprising 2 or more divisions in specific locations. Is it okay? I think there is some activity going on. So am I audible? So the missile launch has not only blatantly, I would say, violated Pakistan's airspace, but also undermined the global aviation rules and protocols, thereby endangering commercial flights, human life, and property, as well highlighted by my worthy colleagues. So under the 2005 accord, India and Pakistan agreed to inform each other of a planned 5 days period within which a ballistic missile test will take place with 3 days notice of the initiation of this window. So India and Pakistan have also pledged that missiles will not overfly the international border in our line of control, and that their trajectories will remain at least within 40 kilometers or 40 kilometers away from land, at least 75 kilometers from these boundaries. So notably, India is bound to give an immediate notice of nuclear accidents under the 2007 accord. So this missile incident was not reported by India. Even if one was to accept that the incident was indeed an accidental launch. So what held then India back from immediately communicating to the Pakistani side about such a launch? That is a big question mark. So the fact suggests that the projectile, of course, endangered many international and domestic flights in both Pakistani and Indian airspace, as it could have hit civilian aircraft in its path. So in addition, the missile launch endangered human life and property, risking the broader regional peace and stability. So this incident certainly questions India's international obligations under the Article 2, paragraph 4 of the UN Charter that states all members shall refrain in their international relations from the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any state, or in any other manner inconsistent with the purposes of the UN. So India should fully abide by its international obligations as the duty to protect dangerous arsenals and materials and systems related to WMDs, as well as to ensure nuclear security is a strict liability of a state under the international law. So now I would like to ponder the why India failed to use hotlines during this crisis situation. So this incident warrants deeper assessment whether this was an accidental launch as claimed by India, or an intentional act, as was highlighted by previous colleagues. So the question arises, if it was a technical malfunction, then why India failed to use hotlines to inform Pakistan? The DGMO's hotlines of two countries were not used. There was no other military, diplomatic, or political channel used by India to notify Pakistan of this fire till the time Pakistan's ISPR held a public press conference asking India for explanation on the incident. So this event suggests India's certainly irrational nuclear behavior. So the Foreign Secretary hotlines, which was established as a part of the nuclear CBMs between the two countries, is reportedly dysfunctional following Indian refusal to maintain any engagement with Pakistan. So this failure of diplomacy can be squarely blamed on India's hubris and its belligerence marked by refusal to engage with Pakistan, contrary to the practices of the nuclear weapon powers like the US and Russia, which at the height of their tension and the present conflict in Ukraine, still continue to maintain channel of communications. So if anything, there existed a negative communication of intentions since the missile incident took place against the backdrop of the tracking and interception of an Indian submarine in Pakistani waters later last year, and the Indian Army chief's warning to Pakistan of preemptive strikes. So why then, under this scenario, I would like to ponder that why joint probe is required. So a joint probe is required to accurately establish facts surrounding the incident, as it has violated airspace of Pakistan, spirit of bilateral existing agreements and international aviation protocols. So one-sided facts may not satisfy Pakistan or overcome Pakistan's misperceptions. So joint probe may, in my view, is highly relevant in order to mitigate confusion, build future confidence and trust, and mitigate future risks. So it will lead to further minimize possibility of states' compulsions of arms readiness and deployment of arsenal. So my fear is that this particular incident has pushed both India and Pakistan towards readiness mode. So that need to be managed. So I would like to present now some risk reduction measures. So the two states, in my view, have achieved nuclear learning and enough nuclear efficiency and sufficiency in terms of harming each other. So both should work on minimizing the risks of unauthorized or accidental launch or detonation, misperceptions, and miscalculations. So a most urgent need is reactivation of strategic communication channels and establishing additional ones for crisis management. So some risk reduction measures that I propose here are: one, both should urgently and formally expand the scope of 2005 ballistic missile test pre-notification agreement to include cruise missiles. So it is urgent that states on both sides pass immediate notification via a secure high-level hotlines if accidents like this ever happen again. So it would also clearly be a good idea that to test missile near either the India-Pakistan border. So idea is not good to test missiles near the borders. So there is also a need to bring into missile test notification agreement the notification of all the missile tests, including air-launched and sea-based, sea-launched missiles. So number two, I would say that restraint measures should be taken against the deployment of destabilizing system, which could seriously impact crisis and arms control stability, and initiate talks between both states to clarify the nature of different missiles, as which ones are conventional and which ones are and which ones are assigned basically the strategic role. So number three, keep the DGMO's hotlines under all the urgent circumstances open, despite their ongoing mistrust and differences developed in the backdrop of Balakot crisis and the Indian stripping of semi-autonomous status of Kashmir. So fourth, I would propose that India-Pakistan 2007 agreement on prevention of accidental and unauthorized launch of nuclear weapons need to be amended to explicitly mention delivery systems as well, or there could be a new arrangement to cover inadvertent accidental firing of missiles. So five, I would say that reactivating dialogue on all the issues, including Kashmir, will minimize growing uncertainty and mistrust. Six, introducing code of conduct on use of media during crisis, as media does play a sensational role in escalating, not de-escalating crisis situation. So finally, both the states should lead to further reaching arms control or stabilizing initiatives, including prospective restraint measures. So the missile launch, I would say, also points to the serious need to clarify the alert status of missiles and targeting practices between the two countries. However, in the absence of misperceptions and inadvertent escalation will continue to loom large. So the two states nuclear, the two nuclear armed states cannot continue to allow failure of diplomacy, put the whole region and beyond at risk. So I would like to conclude by reiterating that whether the incident was accidental, unauthorized, or deliberate incursion, by all dimensions, it puts into question Indian claim of responsibility and technical advancements. So if India has taken such move based on malign intentions, it has undertaken a huge risky misadventure to test Pakistan national resolve while violating UN Charter, international aviation rules, and safety protocols. So India would be gravely mistaken if it draws some wrong conclusions from this misadventure, given the current ceasefire along the LOC and some other markers surrounding the March 19 incidents. Pakistan acted with prudence. So, however, it would be dangerous and totally wrong to assume that an actual crisis situation might evidence similar restraints from Pakistan. Any nuclear weapon state is bound to take an incoming dual-purpose missile as the highest threat and take response measures as it deems appropriate. So if the incident was a malfunction, then it questions credibility of Indian cruise missiles regiment, its C2 systems and safety procedures and efficiency of workforce. So luck has been on the side of both the countries. That lack of collateral damage, as was highlighted earlier, restrained Pakistan's retaliation. Had there been any, as highlighted by my colleague Ali, cost of human lives, destruction of economic or critical infrastructure, probably, certainly, that could have introduced different outcomes. So testing a nuclear weapon state's tolerance and patience level is always risky and catastrophic. So both states should have no illusion that uncontrollable escalation risks are attached given the geographical proximity and time factor involved on nuclear use decision. So more so role of any outsider player as a facilitator or crisis manager in this region is exceedingly currently limited. So both should act rationally, as emotional and intolerant behavior is not commensurate with the responsibility of a nuclear weapon state. So with this note, I would like to thank you all for your kind attention, and I'm open for interactive session.
Thank you, Dr. I'm sorry. Thank you, Dr. Rizwana, for a very lucid and very clear presentation on this very important topic. And you have very effectively answered all the questions that have been framed for your presentation on the agreements of 1991, 2005, 2007. I will now open the floor for a question, answer, and interactive session. And I would request all the speakers, questioners, participants to identify themselves, try to ask very brief and concise questions, and do not couple the opportunity with several questions at the same time, because then that takes up the time available for the entire session. So please go ahead. I will now welcome any question from the floor. Yes, please. Just a minute. Are you audible? Is everybody hearing you? Yeah.
First question is, how can it reduce the exchange with respect to general political instability? Secondly, should we expect such provocative actions on the behalf of Indian Air Force, just like Indian naval action in recent submarine incidents?
Thank you.
I think that this crisis, which you have very rightly pointed out, the current political crisis is seems something very different. But we have to not forget, in the parliamentary political system, these kind of the things seems normal. Change of the government. Of course, the abnormality is that we lack the tradition and experience of such things. That's why we have seen that the things have been dragged much. But at the same time, what was happened that if there was no political crisis started from the, let's say, last month, maybe our response at the diplomatic level, at the political level, had been better than the current response. We were in a better position to sensitize the international community, not for, even for the sake of India. It's important for the Indians, not only for Pakistan, that Indian and the other South Asians, and including the Chinese or the neighborhood, because India's Agni missile range is 5,000 kilometers, and their first supersonic test they conducted with the Agni 1. So it means that they are trying to increase the speed of their missiles from 1 to 3 Mach, even if they are not going for, they are going for a hypersonic, but so if a state with with this range and with this speed missiles, and if it is unable to manage that, I said the DRDO lacks this capacity after this. Otherwise, we can say that they have a capacity to handle this. It's not, maybe their missiles will be passing out Pakistan, but they are hitting the Iran, hitting the China, hitting the any objects in the Indian Ocean. So that's the point. And on this issue, definitely, if we had a stable political system, we were able to focus more. Our foreign minister were in a position to focusing on this kind of challenges rather than focusing in the parliament and making speeches. Second point is response. I think that Pakistanis have to learn that we are nuclear weapons state. From us now, our response is not expected as a knee-jerk response. And there's no need to respond on many things now. It's clear that we tested the nuclear weapons. We have been occasionally testing our delivery vehicles. We have demonstrated on 27th and in the aftermath of 27th February 2019 that whatever India had an advantage in 1971, or India tried to use its compelling strategy, to some extent it was successful, or a deterrent stability in South Asia is dependent on the third party or the Americans' good offices, no more required. So I think that after the 227, the strategic environment of South Asia is entirely different. And we, as a responsible member of civilized society, must realize to live with this. So no need to react. Our reaction is very appropriate. And yes, that's the reason. If you see, we identified that the submarine was trying to enter in our water. We just alarmed them. We were in a position to hit it, and we didn't. So that establishes the mode or the code of conduct, that how we are going to respond, that we are not, you can say, trigger happy nation. We are going to only tell them that you have limits, you are identified. We have an option to respond. That's enough. No need to further go for this, because otherwise it will be having a negative impact. And we are unfortunately labeled as a nation that which is always at a trigger. No, we are not. This is a propaganda about us. We are very self-confident, responsible nuclear weapon state. That's enough.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other question?
There was I think, I just quickly, because you are recovering this, there were two ways to see it. There was a response which I noticed. Question was asked to the American, in the American press briefing. He said, yes, accident happened and that's all. So Americans' response, and that's why I said that the other countries are too much, because for the Europeans, European crisis is more important than our region. And second, we have to not forget, the Americans started looking India as a regional great power or a regional hegemon starting from the December 2017, when the Trump administration released national security strategy that India had a role to play in South Asia, Indian Ocean, and beyond. And from that day, they have been trying to establish in their own communities as well. They are democratic societies, and convincing them that it's a responsible state. Otherwise, there will be a question that why arrow missile technology from Israel with the permission of Americans going there? Why American offered Patriot Pack 3, though India didn't purchase it, and they went for S-400, why did they offer these kind of systems to an irresponsible UK system? So it's a problem from them. And that's why international response is irresponsible response, I could say. That is my take on it.
I totally agree with Dr. Jaswal. I think I hold the same view that South Asia is not on world's priority agenda at this stage. Of course, mainly because of Ukraine crisis, world is heavily engaged particularly the major powers in Ukrainian crisis situation. And secondly, I would say that I totally agree again with Dr. Jaspal that India currently holds globally privileged position because India is in the major alliance system of the US in the broader Asia Pacific region against China, and in order to legitimize, of course, US mobility and stability in the Asia Pacific region. So keeping that in view, of course, this missile incident did not carry much weight for the global community. But when scientifically we try dealing with it, I think Pakistan has protested. Such kind of debates and discussion that we hold, our strictest voice goes out to the global corridors, and the relevant scientific institutions have definitely and certainly taken notice of it. Yesterday, I was reading through, a report, and different international platforms, they have reported this particular event. Some very good analytical, outcomes we have seen coming out of international, scholars and journalists reporting this particular event. So I think this is, in a way, I would say, the event has been taken, into consideration, but there is no political response at the states level for, as I highlighted, for the reasons that are known to us because of their political alliance system with India. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take one more question. Did you have?
I just thank you. I just wanted to briefly add just 2 points.
Please.
After this incident, there are 3 things which I will encourage you to look at. India has carried out several tests of BrahMos missiles after this incident. At least 3 tests have been reported. 2 tests were conducted yesterday. One from the naval version from the surface, another from Su-30 MKI, which is the air launch version, and another test was earlier conducted. So this indicates, and very interestingly, the Twitter handle of the Indian Air Force mentioned that the Indian Air Chief was personally present in Andaman and Nicobar Islands where this was carried out, and it was an operational readiness test. So this is quite insightful that there are some problems which they are trying to rectify and check and validate their systems. One, I think Pakistan's response can be summarized in 3 domains: diplomatic, psychological, and kinetic. In terms of diplomatic, as Dr. Rizwana rightly pointed out, Pakistan has condemned the irresponsible behavior. Pakistan has warned the international community about Indian irresponsible action. Pakistan has demanded a joint probe from India, and Pakistan has also raised 7 questions specifically regarding the safety and security of the Indian strategic weapon systems. That's the diplomatic side. In the psychological domain, the international media and Pakistani media has raised concern. Obviously, there are limitations considering our influence. However, I think a month later, the recent test of Shaheen 3 could be seen as a strategic signal to warn India that its entire territory, including that of Nicobar and Andaman Island, remains vulnerable to Pakistan's strategic capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take one more question from those present, and then I have to put to the panel the online questions. So please, who is next?
Associate Director Research. My question is, the speakers mentioned that India's irrational nuclear behavior as well as the responsibility of the international community. So what will be the options or channels Pakistan should use to bring the attention of international community about the seriousness of this issue? Thank you.
Okay, I'll club 2 questions. You also ask Kumar.
Thank you, sir. I am Kumar Khan. I work here as an associate research editor. Sir, I have a kind of a hypothetical question that if we suppose and believe that India's accidental launch was an accidental launch. So what would be the possibility if this would have happened on China's side? So how you all experts see that what would be the China's response or the international community response on this accidental launch? This hypothetical fact. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
I think that
Please.
I think that both the Dr. Zvana and Muhammad Ali answered your question already on the diplomatic what Pakistan did. So I think if there is a need to add, they can add in it. But Huma, I'm more interested to answer your question that A, accident can happen. We have to go for preventive measures, which have been, you can say, enlisted by Dr. Zvana very clearly. But if it happened with China, I think Chinese response could be the same which we had. There would be more. Maybe they will be not even sharing with them because the leftover of this missile, which you can say, picked up and then reverse it and checked it and everything. Because once my understanding is that when missile lost its trajectory, Indians lost themselves also. Because this is a supersonic missile, and if you have a target, hypothetically, it go to the desert, it just go inside, and then the sand goes. You are just searching where the missile has gone. This is a problem of this kind of technology. And so maybe Chinese are so confident they kept it and let them to think where the missile has gone, and we both confused. So this is the first point. Second is Chinese are more confident about their defenses, unlike us. Our nation is more strategically politicized. Their nation is not strategically politicized. Here, every person, especially in the evening media programs, is an expert of security and business. So that's why we are charged. But on such issues, because simply thinking or always looking the adversary, yes, we look the adversary with a contempt, but looking always in a nuclear environment, that adversary is doing everything by design, it's not quite. That is my. Is one of the
Yes, yeah. If you want to address, but the international community response. Actually, let me say a few things on that. The international community, as the point was made, that this has been overtaken by the Ukraine crisis because all the Western media is focused on Ukraine and their governments are also focused on Ukraine and Russian action there. Now, this is an incident which has two aspects. One is that many people don't focus on the technical aspect of such a development. They would not know about missile attack, what it entails, or whether if it was nuclear armed, what danger does that represent. And secondly, India, the international politics, I always say, is even more complex than domestic politics. International politics is, as one has practiced it and has seen it, is highly complex. So at this juncture, it has not drawn attention to the extent that it does because of Ukraine and because of India's overall position, as well as even their standing in the global scenario. But there are steps that can be taken, and I think there was a question that was raised whether it can be taken to the UN or to the ICJ. So these are, I will not venture an opinion on this right away, because this is a technical consideration which must be evaluated by international lawyers. And I think there could be a case made for the raising of this issue at an international forum. However, the entire process in any such situation is creating the awareness. And I think this roundtable, as well as other efforts that have been made in this connection, writing of research papers, articles, op-eds, and social media, resort to social media, all this adds to the awareness which should create international communities, draw international communities' attention. So we should continue this process.
I think nobody mentioned and talked about the OIC resolution that Pakistan got passed recently in Islamabad. That is something I would say very significant development, where all the OIC member states collectively raised a voice against Indian, of course, safety and security mechanism, their reliability, and of course responsibility at the international level. So more significantly, I would say that we have seen since 2016 a series of cases where unauthorized hands got access to Indian, uranium material, and they have been selling in the commercial national international markets. So that is a big question mark that, of course, raises question against Indian nuclear safety and security. Along with that, of course, this particular incident certainly attracts world community's attraction. So I think I totally agree that there is need to scholarly evaluate these aspects on the more kind of I would say scientific criteria, thereby publishing through national and international relevant platforms. This incident is very serious. Both of the incidents, this particular missile incident and that I just highlighted, uranium theft related series of incidents that we witnessed in the past. These need to be really evaluated, assessed. We live in a very dangerous, dangerous nuclear environment in South Asia. So if we just overlook the series of events taking place like this, including Balakot, this would, lead to catastrophic outcomes. So I think we really need to, at the diplomatic level, at the political level, at the scholarly and academic, level, we need to collectively raise this voice through our partners, through our allies, and of course, domestically by using all the available channels to, reach out to the global corridors. That this is a very serious problem, and they really need to look into it. So somebody raised a question pointing towards a domestic political crisis and how it impacts this particular incident. And online also somebody actually directed this question to me. I think first of all, I would say the domestic political crisis was not that acute. Our nature of it, this particular crisis was not so serious, where we evaluate the system was not in place. So system is in place, institutions are working effectively in a robust way, and new Prime Minister has been placed within no time. So I don't think that if nature of the domestic political crisis was such that led to impact, or that will create such kind of impact. But what is more important is that, of course, Pakistani defense-related institutions that work under the NCA are working effectively and vigilant and focusing on these matters very closely. But at the same time, I would say that future scenarios and risks are very important. We are undergoing hybrid and witnessing hybrid warfare. So under hybrid warfare, any kind of scenarios probably are likely to emerge in the near future. So this is very important that our internal institutions are robust and strong. More stronger internal institutions would be able to bounce back such kind of events and incidents and challenges. And within that, we will have to create resilience at the domestic level, not only to absorb shocks at the hybrid level, but also to bounce back. So for that, of course, it is a collective national responsibility, collective institutional national responsibility, that we take these incidents very serious, prepare ourselves for the future to mitigate such risks, and take and initiate such measures where we get the relevant, the partners, international community on board to deal with India, to, address such challenging futuristic scenarios and situations.
Thank you. I have now a number of questions that have been asked online. So I will put it to the panel to address these questions. And I think हाँ कुछ हो गए. Some have been done, but like there is one question that I would like the panel to look at, to think about, and to give their considered response, which is our our response system question. Our response system in terms of our satellite sensors and radars seems not to have picked up the missile misfire in time. And as a result, the interceptors were not employed. Your comments on that, please.
Let me make it clear, even Americans have no capability to intercept supersonic missiles. This is a reality. So even if we identified, that's why we shared with them the time, change of the path. And even India has no capability to intercept any missile of Pakistan. So this is just an exaggerated argument or a fear that if we had and we hit it in the air, why do? It cannot. It's not a submarine you identified it, you were able to. It's not an aircraft, it's a missile. And supersonic missile. So be careful. So this is a reality and we have to live with this reality. Yeah, no, it's not. Even you can't. Because let me add it. There is in the United States, billions of dollars they invest on the missile defense system. And in this missile defense system is more against workable, hypothetically speaking, ballistic missile systems. Not against the cruise as well, which they have more maneuver. That is the cruise advantage for the time. In 2016, the Americans did a first time intermediate, you can say, ground-based launch interceptor. And with this, it was a successful test and it hit in the mid-course of the intercontinental and in a controlled environment. Then in 2000, because of that, Trump was very much talking about fire and fury and little rocket expired, these kind of the things. But when he was informed by his scientists or advisors that even a rudimentary nodong cannot be checked by this. So the tone was changed from there to the summits. So my point here is, and after that, I'm regularly following sometimes, yes, these systems works in the theater and against the pre-launch, but pre-launch is again difficult. They are in silence. So no one has. So it is proven we have to live, and only deterrence or defense against the missile is you have a retaliatory capability. So if you are in a position, and from the very beginning, this invention that if my missiles can penetrate, definitely I deter them. And if you see 1972 ABM treaty, which was based on this concept that vulnerability and survivability exist on both sides, then there is a deterrence mechanism. So if Indians are vulnerable to my strikes, as Ali mentioned that we went for reconfirming them that after Shaheen 3, already we had tested it with 2,750 kilometers, that we are in a position to bleed you. We are in a position to hit you back. That is only a deterrence against the missiles. No system can work.
Let me go through the questions. Cruise missiles operate along a pre-programmed flight path prior to launch on the model of fire and forget, why did this BrahMos missile, as indicated by its flight path, change its direction towards Pakistan?
It is a maybe technological attraction that it go to Pakistan, fed in it. But no, this is the important thing is, that's why we are saying technological failure. And all the missiles, when you fire, you have identified the target, the trajectory, and the arc is identified. So it's not only cruise. But the issue here is that error can happen. And technology, that's why we say you cannot trust entirely on technologies. You have to be focused on the human.
Yeah.
And that's why Professor Rizwana was rightly saying that once they lost the control, immediately they informed the Pakistan on a hotline, something wrong. Don't mislead it. Don't think it authorized. So that is the point where we are saying, maybe even picking and going on a hotline, maybe it's 1 minute to 2 minutes. It's difficult. But still, when you are conducting this kind of exercise, you are keeping your hotlines on a high alert. So before firing, you inform there. We have a 2005 agreement on the ballistic missiles. So that kind we can include in it. So that's why what my point in my presentation was also that DRDO, since its last 6-7 decades work, it has failed to have a proficiency in the missile technology. Even it has been investing in since 1983, which we call it Integrated Missiles Program, and then recently they shelved into again with the DRDO project. They are getting the system from the Russians, and they are reversing the engineering. They are getting the system from the Israelis, but they are not capable enough. So that is not alarming for us. It's alarming for Indians themselves. That is the point which we have to take into account. Yes, we are their adversaries. It came to us, and we are now making and sensitizing them. But it is equally alarming for the Indians. Think if it's not gone for the Mia Channu, it go to the Delhi. What is going to happen? Because it was a loose fire. So that is the point.
Yeah, please. In fact, I was saying that why did it go to Miachannu? So, I mean, it was not, it's just unintended movement. Please.
Okay, I think there are a couple of similar questions where from audience where people are trying to ask impact of this incident on Indian export. Yes, we heard that India did strike nearly a $4 million deal with Philippines to export, this BrahMos cruise missile technology. And I think Philippines did probe and ask questions from the Indians on explanation regarding this malfunction. Initially, as we all know, that India came up with a narrative that it was malfunction, but right after the inquiry that they unilaterally conducted internally, after that they tried building narrative on human error. So they said this is not actually a malfunction, but a man-made error basically occurred and led to this incident. So this is clear reflection of this particular question that you were trying to highlight, that it certainly had a setback and yielded setback on Indian exports. And it would take a while if it was, of course, a malfunction, then of course it would impact their exports and industry. So in my view, yes, cruise missile is a new technology. India is still working on it. And Dr. Jaspal knows better than me that India has been working for long on their missile technology, which has been proven globally not as robust as Pakistan's is. So I believe that it would be a malfunction, but again, we cannot rule out any intentions of advantage. So that should be into our consideration for the future planning. Thank you.
What the Indian side elements with Einstein's gravitational force and curve, see which way the force takes the curve.
They did not have a control over it. That is the important point. So all this is a speculation and hypothetical. So let's not go into that.
Can I just
We have to add one point, one line or so. We have to keep in mind, this is the difference between the aircraft and the aircraft can be called back. Missile once fired, it's fired. That's the situation.
Yeah.
Can I just add one
Yeah.
point? Thank you, sir. I think it's very important that we should understand, and I just wanted to reiterate and emphasize the earlier point made by Dr. Jaswal. I think deserves a reflection. We discussed three scenarios: accidental, unauthorized, or deliberate. I think a very important point made by Dr. Jaswal was that even if Indian arsenal is large, it is on high alert, but it is safely and securely kept, then that would invoke trust, which is expected of a responsible nuclear power. But if, as Dr. Rizwana also pointed out just now, that if some group captain is being investigated, rather than that indicates that there is a possibility of a mad colonel dilemma or an insider threat in which an unauthorized launch can take place as well, which increases the risk for deterrent stability and crisis stability between two countries much more than an accidental launch. And that also raises the possibility that perhaps all the missile forces, their commanders, are not completely in control of their political leadership as per their doctrinal commitment. So that is something that the international community must seriously consider. Thank you.
Yes. So there is again a question about ICJ and UN. I think the best international body that should address this problem is perhaps the International Atomic Energy Agency. That is because of two reasons. One, that they have a proven record of and a full mechanism, a full apparatus for safety and security matters. They have a Department of Safeguards, they have a Department of Security, and they have the necessary experts. And the other is that there should be certain steps that could be recommended by them for avoiding this kind of thing in the future. So I think that we are nearing the end of our time, and I have promised the speakers not to extend it because of Ramzan and the pressure that it generates in terms of physical endurance. So I think I will conclude the question answer session and make a few points that I want to sum up in a broader context. First is that we have to raise awareness of this issue because this is a matter that should generate concern, particularly in a very volatile region where both India and Pakistan are nuclear capable countries, and they don't have a very happy record of relationship, of bilateral relations. So that is important. And in that context, the fact that this was the first accidental launch of missile between two nuclear armed rivals like Pakistan and India, the incident could have led to Pakistani retaliation and escalation of some kind if Pakistan had not exercised prudence, restraint, and responsibility. Given the fact that India is fast building a triad of BrahMos cruise missiles and is producing and deploying these missiles in large numbers, it is expected to be the key capability to execute India's counterforce ambitions against Pakistan and China. However, this incident in a way has shown the chink in the armor, the weakness of this particular missile. So I think they have to be mindful of that. And we have to view this in terms of Indian conventional counterforce and India's NFU pledge, preemption strategy, and alertness levels. India's overall clumsy management of its high-value strategic and conventional weapon system and its nuclear assets and platforms have been repeatedly exposed over the past 5 years. Repeated uranium theft incidents that have been referred to already, and the manhandling of nuclear submarine Arihant by its crew recently, all add up to a very alarming situation in terms of India's safety and security. So we have to think about it, and that's what we have done in this roundtable. Some useful points have been made. There has been the recommendation for a joint probe, which the government of Pakistan has already asked for, even in its public declarations. Then there has been the proposal of developing risk reduction measures, strengthening of existing agreements, and other CBM measures that should be put in place. But this, I think, also needs the involvement of the international authority. So I think the IAEA is perhaps the best organization to deal with it. And since I know it, I've been there, they can address themselves to this in a very concerted manner. Finally, this was a highly dangerous and highly risky incident, and India should be made to realize that it cannot get away with this kind of irresponsible action if it happens again. So the government of Pakistan has made that clear as well. So thank you very much. I think I will draw this session to a close, and I thank the speakers as well as the participants for their very active cooperation and involvement in the animated discussion that we have had. Thank you. A vote of